You're listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast, celebrating hunting dog heritage, competition, and community. United Kennel Club has been the hunting dog sports home for coonhounds, beagles, retrievers, pointers, cur, feist, and more for over 125 years. All right, starting with circle points first. A, B, C, and D relate to circle points. 5A, when dogs strikes and trees on a tree or a hole in the ground where there could be a coon, yet judge does not see coon and no off game is seen. In that case, you're going to circle your dog strike and tree points, whether it's a tree or a hole in the ground where there could be a coon, but you just can't see it. Would be like a hole or a den tree, or maybe in the summertime the trees are just too leafy. Doesn't mean just because the tree has leaves that we're going to automatically circle it, but where there could be a coon, need to make sure, there's places that we just can't see to score, and there's just could be something there, but we just can't see it all, can't shine it all for whatever reason. Then that is sent or followed by a note. It says this: in case of running coon in a hole or place of refuge other than a tree, handler may call dog treed. However, if not called treed, cast may proceed to general area and track can be considered finished if dogs, by actions either tree barking or otherwise, show to the satisfaction of the judge coon to be there. So there's just read it. Don't put more into it than what's there, but that goes to show in a previous section of the rules, we talked about the stationary a little bit, but this is where if a dog is in a hole in the ground or thinking it might be, this is the rule that also allows the cast to go to the area where the dog is, without calling a dog or the dog treat or all dogs treat.
Yep, that's exactly right.
So that's part of that. And then it ends with the last sentence says one dog must show end of trail. What that means is, let's say, give a scenario that you have. Let's just use all the dogs. You have dogs treat in a hole when you get there. You see they're in a hole. And then you have the third and the fourth dog. They're just kind of sitting back, maybe barking a little bit, or they're right in that general area. Guess what? Handle all the dogs. They don't all have to have their nose in the hole or anything like that to be handled there. Any dog that's right there, right around there, you handle them. If they're, if the track is finished and they show that the track is finished, that they're finished, even though they don't have their nose in the hole, they might not be barking or whatever, those dogs should be handled and scored at that hole.
Yeah, it seems like I've talked a lot about holes this year for some reason. I don't know why that is, but one question that came up is a situation where, well, we're talking about you get into a hole and there's one dog showing the hole and there's another dog there close to him who may be barking, and then they got in there and these dogs were all declared treed. There's one 30 yards down the creek. And in this situation, the first thing I'll say is that in most instances, only one dog can really show a hole, depending on how big it is, or else you're going to end up maybe with a dog fight or an unfortunate circumstance. But when you get in there, it's going to be on the judge a little bit to make a judgment call at who's at that hole. And to me, when you're talking about a dog being 30 yards down the creek, just because this dog's showing the end of trail, this dog's not at the hole.
Be reasonable.
Yes.
Be reasonable. That would not be reasonable to not minus that dog. He's not at the hole. He's not there.
That's someone trying to get by with what they can by manipulating words, but
exactly,
that's not the case here.
Yep. So there you go. One dog must show end of trail. For the rest of them, anything that's basically there, be reasonable there and handle all those dogs there. For dogs declared treat in a hole or tile, see Rule 3B. 3 is under plus points. And how to score those is basically what 3B is going to tell you, and it's going to be essentially, without me going back, it's going to tell you the dogs declared struck and treed to get strike and tree points plus both, and dogs struck only and not treed, just strike points only. Or 4G if applicable. 4G is if there's obviously no chance for a coon to be there. 4G is probably going to be, let me see, 4G, let's just go back to it. Uh, where's
I got it here. It's when dogs tree and a non-hunting judge or majority of the cast when a hunting judge is used can plainly see no coon to be
there
there.
you go. That's going to minus it.
Yep.
Strike and tree minus or if they're called tree. Yep. So there you go. So I think for 5A is pretty self-explanatory there. Just read it. And hey, like anything, sometimes instead of just listening to this guy give his opinion of this or that, sometimes you just need to buckle down and read what the actual wording is in the rules. Read it.
Yep.
This
That's
is one of those. 5A. Read it.
Oh boy, you gave me 5B.
There
huh?
you go. Yep.
You have this tattoo already.
This is 5B, 5B, 5B. This is probably one. I feel like one of the it's not to me it's an elementary rule. Easy one to understand, and it's as clearly it's a short rule. Read it word for word, and it means exactly that. Nothing more, nothing less, but it is still one of the most misapplied rules or not applied rules for some reason. Misapplied or not applied.
Yeah. 5B, and remember, we're in circle point section right now. That's important to notate here. 5B is going to read, no dog to receive minus points for coming into tree after judge arrives unless a coon is seen and the dog's treeing are awarded plus points. It's in the circle point section, so here it's telling me two things right here. One is if the dog comes into the tree after the judge arrives and a coon is seen, the strike points for that dog is going to be minus. The other thing it's telling me is that if the dog comes into the tree after the judge arrives and no coon is seen, so whether we circle the tree or minus the tree, the dog's tree points are going to be circled because we're in the circle point section.
Yeah, nothing more, nothing less. So it mentioned here in one of the other rules under Rule 4 when we talked about minus points for dogs coming into cast. Here it is coming into tree. This is what we're talking about, coming into tree after you have arrived. 5B is going to apply. They're not going to get their strike points minus there. But I think that's maybe the other rule that they're getting mixed up or want to use here, but it does not apply. I remember when I first started competing, I used to get confused for a while with how to score dogs that are treeing when you get there versus dogs that come in after you get to the tree. And when I finally figured out that 5B applies 100% of the time for dogs that come in after, when I got that on my brain, then it was easier for me to figure out how to score them on the other dogs that are there beforehand. 5B, 100% of the time, every time they come in after the judge arrives. And even so much as this, if a champion dog comes in after and there's off game there, even this rule right here, 5B, still takes precedence. And you'll see note of that under Rule 6, the scratch rule for off game. That's the only exception to them is if they come into an off game tree after the judge arrives. And the only reason for that, the intent of that is decades old, but it still nevertheless has the same intent. When it was first put into rule, and that was not to minus or penalize dogs for coming in after it was deemed that you're enticing maybe dogs to come in, whether you're squalling or you're maybe shining or what have you. And the only time you would penalize them is if there was a raccoon there and they should have been there before.
Yep. I just want to say one last thing before we move on. When we've mentioned Rule 4F, we've looked at it all the way through. We've talked about 5B. We looked at it all the way through. They're black and white. There's no room for interpretation there. The only place it comes down to a judge's interpretation when it pertains to these two rules is the dog treeing and not declared treed when you get there, or did it come in after the judge arrived? And I can understand in some situations when it's close to what that is, sometimes that may come down to a judge's discretion, and that's what it is. But otherwise, in applying the rule, black and white. Sometimes the judge may have to make a decision on which it is, but the rules are black and white once that decision's made.
I don't think that it's even that hard to determine, really, if I'm the judge. I go in there, and whatever dogs are there at the time when I arrived, and I account this dog and this dog, those are the ones that are going to be there when I arrived.
Yeah.
It's that, make that. And in doing so, Here's another thing that I think you can eliminate a lot of those things. I think, and we'll talk about it later. Is I don't ever want handlers to, if somebody the handler is asked to vote, we have a rule that they have to vote or they're going to be scratched. Well, sometimes the question comes up, well, how are they going to vote? Well, I think me as a judge can help that a whole lot sometimes. If oftentimes it has to be to do with maybe a dog fight at the tree. Well, I didn't see it. Okay, I don't want somebody to come in and not see what I saw. So one of the things I'm going to do as a judge, I think through experience, will tell you, hey, before we go into the tree, I'm going to make sure everybody's here before I take the next move and turn my light on, and we all see the same thing there. I'm not going to give anybody that excuse. And this is one of those that would happen, be included in that whole umbrella of that it encompasses to do that, I guess, and whatever dogs that were there when we arrived are the ones that are going to be handled and considered treeing and not declared treed. Anything that comes out after that point or comes popping in, that's now after.
Yeah.
Is the way I always looked at it. So, and you're right, judge's discretion, but yeah.
Another good reason to keep the cast
together.
Yep.
A whole lot of reasons to keep the cast together, and that's definitely one of them. And there's a bunch more. No dog to receive. So that was 5B. So let's move on to 5C. If half the cast votes to plus and half the cast votes to circle a tree. So there we have two guys that we see that see the coon, and two that just absolutely did not see it. And let's talk about that. Just because I did not see it does not make me a crook or trying to pull something. Not every time. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have situations where a raccoon will look at somebody and just will not look again. And I have never been one to say, "Yep, I saw it," when you didn't see it. What are you going to do? That's a lie. If I say I saw it and didn't actually see it, and that happens sometimes. It really does.
Yeah.
So that could be a case. Well, because you could ask, well, how could two people see it, and what's wrong with the other two? Did they go blind? Well, okay, it's probably happened where somebody just flat didn't want to and refused to, but that's not. It can also happen where they really did not see it for whatever reason. Might be a good reason. They just absolutely did not look, or the 8 minutes of shine time is up, and at that point there's no reason for me to look any longer, and that can happen sometimes. But when you don't, in other words, you got to have a majority to plus or majority to minus. In this case, it's 2-2. You are going to circle it in that case.
Yep. And no need to feel guilty if you can't see a coon.
Nope.
Rule, let's see, we're in rule 5D now.
5D.
And this tells us if a squirrel is seen on a den tree, and in the parentheses it says must have visible hole large enough for a coon to enter into, or tree has a nest or a place of refuge where a coon could be hidden. So it tells us to circle the points in that instance. And we kind of talked about this just a last rule in 4K. So this is kind of a continuation of that. You get to the tree, you see a squirrel on the outside, but we do see a hole in the tree or a nest or some place of refuge in the tree where a coon could have went into and ran that squirrel out. You'll circle the points in that instance.
Yep, that's it. And that was the intent of that rule, that not to penalize dogs where they ran a track in there or treed where a coon went up in the den or in the nest and ran the squirrel out. That's why you're seeing the squirrel. All right, have we covered the circle portion of this rule of 5?
I believe we've covered that one well.
Okay, the next two, E and F, is when we're going to delete points. So E, Rule 5E, as in elephant, if half the cast votes to circle and half the cast votes to minus a tree, we are going to, in that case, delete the points. In D or in C, we talked half the cast votes to plus and the other cast votes to circle. Here we have half the cast voting to circle and the other half voting to minus. So we're going to delete this. And the reason we're going to delete this, the intent of this was to, if 2 say to minus, they're kind of on the fence, and maybe the other two you kind of question maybe a little bit. I don't know. In other words, this tree right here is not going to come into play when it comes to tiebreaker rules.
Exactly.
Because circle points do come into play under tiebreaker rules, but in this case, when 2 of them voted to minus and the other 2 voted to circle, this one's not going to be a part of that. That's why they put it in there.
Yep.
5E.
5F, another delete points here. It says if dogs are trailing when time is out. So basically, what this is telling us, maybe dogs are trailing in different directions out of hearing, or they're getting onto a property the guy doesn't have permission to be on, or maybe they're getting close to a major highway or something like that, and timeout has to be called per Rule 7.
Well, hey, I'm trying to stop you right there because that is not quite right. That is, in fact, circle points under timeout. But this is when the hunt time is over.
Oh, okay.
This is when the hunt time is over. You know what, Trevor? I do a bunch of different rules. So I do beagles and squirrel dog rules and this, and maybe I am wrong here, but I should have maybe looked first. But let's go down to rules. Where's the timeouts?
Rule 7.
Rule 7. What do we do under Rule 7 when we call timeout? Circle points? No, it is deleted points.
Delete the strike points
delete
and any tree points that have been declared will be scored.
I apologize because I would have been wrong. I was going to say it used to be circle, but I apologize. So it is deleted now. I thought it was just one timeout. They're just for when end of hunt time. But you're right. Anytime you call timeout, I'm thinking of beagle rules. It is still circle. So I apologize. I'm wrong there.
No worries. So yeah. No worries. So in both instances, really, so if timeout's being called for dogs for all the situations we just talked about, or the time runs out in the hunt and the dogs haven't been declared tree, they're just pending strike points, you'll delete their strike points in that instance, and that's per Rule 5F here.
And I stand corrected on that, and I apologize. But no, that is right. Whether it's during the hunt or when the hunt ends, deleted strike points.
And maybe we got a little bit of ahead of ourselves because it looks like Rule 5F did have to do with the end of the hunt, because 5G tells us if judge has to call timeout in accordance with Rule 7. So, and that's pertaining to their strike points, because obviously if a dog's declared treed, and we'll see that in Rule 7 and down in Rule 11 as well. If they are declared treed, the tree point, the dog's still eligible to score even if you call timeout, but the strike points will be deleted if timeout is called in accordance with Rule 7.
That is it right there. It is right. The next one right after that, it talks about where I was smashing my brakes there for a minute. All right, here we go. We're back on track again. You've got me corrected. Doesn't it feel good to be the one that's right sometimes?
That's right.
Especially when your boss halts you there and smashes your brakes in for a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, hey, that's not the case in all of them here, but it is in obviously it is here, and right there it is. F and G right there. All right, moving on to H. Hey, if I'm wrong here, just I owe you one here.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. H, when dog trees on a tree or coon previously scored, those points are going to be deleted. Dog trees on a tree that has already been scored before. It doesn't matter how late in the night or anything like that, and in your cast only is what it's going to apply to. You can't rescore that one again if it's already been scored. Now that doesn't. We talked in the rules. You might have a situation where a dog is declared treed and it leaves that tree and goes elsewhere. That tree becomes open. It's not been scored. A dog got minus for leaving it, but the tree has not been scored. That becomes an open tree and an eligible tree again. But anytime one has been scored, it's no longer eligible. And we have gotten into, over the years, we've gotten into a unique situation where early in the night a tree was scored and it had something in it or didn't have something in it. Later on in the night, a dog's tree on it again, and now it has something. It's already been scored.
That's a previously scored tree.
It's a previously scored tree. The same thing with a previously scored coon. So in other words, you can't have score a coon in a tree here and you take the dogs away and boom, it jumps out and bails out and you turn the dogs loose and run it and tree it again.
Yeah.
It's already been scored. So then in parentheses it says here, cast may go to tree without dogs being declared treed if majority of cast agree when hunting judges are used. And that may be a case when if you have a hole in the ground or place of refuge or something like that. That's just part of that. That's what that means.
Yep. And the last rule here in Rule 5, having to do with deleted points, tells us when dog that is shut out comes into tree, shut out on. So we've talked about the shutout rule. This will now be the third time that we've seen it mentioned. And just like we've talked about before, if you get struck in on but after a dog has already been declared treed, you're going to be struck in with a line underneath it. And if your dog were to cover the dog that's been declared treed and the tree on the tree that it's shut out on, the strike points are going to be deleted in that instance.
Yep, very good. Hey, I would like to back up. We talked a little bit about going to trees or going into the dogs without calling them declared treed. Let's say if they're a hole in the ground. Let's talk about one other scenario. Let's say we agree that, you know what, they are in a hole in the ground, or we think they are. Nobody's going to call their dog treed. Anybody does, number one, you always have to wait the 3 minutes. If a dog's been declared treed, regardless of whether they're on the ground or not, you got to wait the 3 minutes. But we're talking about a situation where we think they're in the ground. We can't see it. We don't know yet, but they sound like they are. They're not on a tree. Nobody's going to call their dog treed. We go in. We decide to go in there. We've got majority of the cast agrees. We're going to go in there. We're going to check these dogs. What do we do when we get in there and they are in fact on a tree? Where a lot of them, some are going to mess up, is going to go handle the dogs anyway. If you do that, now you've got a mess.
That's right.
If they are on a tree, you just back out. Whoa, put on the brakes like we did a minute ago. Put on your brakes. And this is where the judge comes in. Put on the brakes. Don't handle any dogs. Call them treed.
Got to tree them.
Yeah. And in this case, okay, what if they're all declared treed? You know what? The best thing at this point is now to just probably split the tree points and of all those that are there and do it that way. Don't handle them. If you handle dogs on a tree, you've got a problem.
Yeah.
You don't have a hole.
Yeah. Yeah, good clarification. And that's a pretty good bow there on the end of the circled and deleted points discussion there. Rule 5.
Yep. So I think so far in this section, I feel like I'm on a scorecard. I'm losing a little bit here. Hey, this is, you know what? This is also why we have the questions and voting procedures in place, because sometimes not everybody will agree, or they might think that wasn't correct when they were in fact the ones that were wrong. Yeah. But that's how there's procedures in place to correct things. That's the intent of questioning rulings that are made.
Hey, I have both of us have a lot of rules discussions all the time with guys who are really sharp on the rules. But there's a couple different variables. If you're hunting multiple registries that have different rules, it's really easy to get them a little bit confused on the subtle differences. If you're not reading the rule book regularly, or in your case where you're having to read 5 different rule books pretty regularly, it's kind of easy to maybe get one mixed up with the other one.
The biggest thing for me for that.
Sure.
Different times.
Sure. And then also there's some people who, don't, under pressure or anything when you're out in the woods and it's happening fast in a hurry when you have to make a decision and you don't have time to process it, you could sometimes make a wrong interpretation. But that's why we have procedures in place. That's exactly why.
Yeah. And sometimes you'll even have good, solid judges that know the rules real well, and they'll just have
brain lapse.
Yeah, brain lapse for a second, and that happens sometimes. Got a lot going on, and that's happened to me before. I think, gosh, what was I thinking? Just like here a minute ago, right? The next one. Hey, now in my defense, we're looking at this not from the rule book, from the screen where it's that next G is in the next column over, and I had it buried.
Yeah, there's probably was a better way to do this, because
and I'm sure our listeners are going, "Yeah, what the excuse is that?" No, but it's all good. So, yeah, I think that kind of concludes section 5 right there.
Yes, sir.
With Eukanuba, stamina is the one difference I'm seeing. When I'm running hair up north, my dogs will put on 10, 12, 15 miles of solid running, and they just don't tire as easily or as quickly. Oftentimes, my work schedule does not allow me to have the desired physical conditioning on my dogs, but even then, as many as 25 or more miles a day of hard running is just another day in the office. To me, it's been apparent Eukanuba's 30-20 sport formula is making that difference. Eukanuba, the official performance dog nutrition partner of UKC.
In this edition, we're going to take a look at Rule 11, which discusses all things related to scoring dogs. And man, there's a lot of good information in this rule section.
Yeah, there sure is. It's kind of split up in 4 different little segments here. It's scoring dogs prior to arriving at tree is one of them. Another one is after arriving at tree. A third one, it talks about split trees. And the last one talks about recasting. So it's kind of in the order that you would score dogs, I guess. So let's start with prior to arriving at tree under 11A says this: scorecards to be carried by judge or, in parentheses, non-hunting scorekeeper if all cast members agree, and must be scored in plain view of all. Dog must hold the tree for 3 minutes unless all dogs in cast are declared treed, on leash, or hunting time has expired. Let me just stop right there so we don't go too deep in here and repeat things we don't need to. The first part, scorecard, is carried by the judge, or he can assign somebody else to carry it, a non-hunting scorekeeper, a spectator or somebody. But in doing so, he must score it in plain view of everybody. In other words, it should be no secret how he's scoring it. Doesn't mean he has to tell everybody every time, but should communicate. And certainly if somebody asks, if I ask to see the scorecard and you're carrying it, you should never hesitate to show me the scorecard.
That's right.
There should be no question if it's okay that you just don't repeat everything to me, but usually most good handlers, they will kind of know where everybody is, but a lot sometimes they will want to see it, and the judge should make sure that we are allowed to see that at any time we ask for it. Dog must hold the tree for 3 minutes unless all dogs in cast are declared treed. So every time the dog is declared treed, the judge will start a 3-minute clock, and that's going to run. No other dogs can be declared treed there, but they don't have to wait the 3 minutes if all dogs are declared treed or as soon as they all treat. And that happens sometimes. There's just boom, boom, boom.
That's right.
And so once the tree is closed, if they're all scored or all treed, whether they're on the same tree or on separate trees, that makes all trees are closed at that point, even if it's the 3 minutes isn't up. Or if a dog is on leash, so let's say you have a 3-dog cast, 2 of them are declared treed, or dog A falls treed, is called treed, dog B is called treed, dog C is still on the leash. Those trees are closed as soon as that second dog is treed.
Yep.
Or the last dog. Or another time when the tree closes before the 3 minutes is at the end of regulation, when hunt time expires. So let's say you have 30 seconds left in the hunt and a dog falls treed. As soon as that last 30 seconds of the hunt is up, the tree is closed. You can go right to him. That dog doesn't have to hold the tree for 3 minutes. But if you only have, then it goes on to say, if one dog in the cast or one dog remaining in cast, dog must hold tree for 3 minutes. So in that case, whenever it just comes down to a one dog remaining, that dog always has to hold the tree for 3 minutes before you can go to it. And even at the end of the hunt, it doesn't differentiate on that. Dogs declared treed within hunting time are eligible for scoring. So obviously that means hunting time, dog A felt treed, and 15 seconds later, hunt time expires. Dog A is still eligible for scoring on that tree. If at all possible, be at the tree within 3 minutes. Now, this is for the judge. The judge is in charge. And, hey, with 3 minutes, that's not very long anymore. It used to be 5 minutes for a long time, and you would start walking sooner than you might now with 3 minutes. But you want to try to be, if you can. Sometimes you just simply can't because you're stopping a little bit. The judge sometimes all depends on the situation, has a lot going on. He wants to keep a good line of where his dogs are that are called treed, making sure he knows, exactly where they are. But should, if at all possible, try to be there within 3 minutes if you can. Pretty simple. I don't know if you got anything to add before we go further. This is kind of a long one here in A.
Yeah, no, I think going sentence by sentence is good. The only thing you mentioned, dogs declared treed within hunting time are eligible for scoring. You said at the end of the hunt, also before timeout. I just want to make that perfectly clear because I know sometimes that can be a misconception as well. So I think you've covered it all really well so far here.
Okay, so let's move on. If handlers are so far from tree that it will take more than 3 minutes to get to tree, they are to start walking toward tree, but stopping periodically to let other handlers see if their dog is treeing. That's a good one, and sometimes we can periodically, but stopping periodically. we can stop a little bit. So I'll stop and so you can listen for your dog. But then it's going to be me deciding how long we're going to stop, and we're going to move along. We got dogs to score here.
Yep.
But just a courtesy thing, I am going to stop to allow you to listen to your dog. But I'm going to decide as the judge. The judge should decide how long we're going to stop. We're not just going to sit there for 30 seconds so you can listen. That's just stopping periodically to let you listen to see if your dog is treeing or not, so you have an opportunity to call it treed.
Especially before tree time closes.
Exactly,
on the tree there.
exactly. Yep. So there might be different variables, that, but the judge again is in charge of this. Anything more to add on that?
No.
Okay. Next sentence says, judge is not to let any handler keep holding him away from tree, just to let dog get to tree after 3 minutes are up. So that's pretty straightforward. In other words, I think what that means, or one of the scenario that might be, we might have dog A declared treed up here. B is kind of milling around there somewhere. You hear it opening or whatever, and my dog is over here, and I'm trying to stall you to try to get this dog to go in. B might be the one beating me, and I want to see it take some minus, and hopefully it's going to be there because it's going to get minused if it ends up on this tree or whatever. And I'm just trying to hold the cast to try to get that dog there, as anything like that.
Little gamesmanship.
Yeah, little games. Yeah, playing a little, trying to be a little slick here. But there again is where a good judge comes in, and don't let anybody hold you from, from getting there when it's not, no reason for it. So there, I don't know if you got anything to add to that A. There's kind of a lot in that A.
Yeah, there is. It's really in depth. I think you covered it pretty well. I think the best way to probably do this section is, and if you're reading the rule book, I think take it sentence by sentence. And,
Yep.
and if you see something that you need to be able to find in a hustle, if you're out in the woods or something, hey, that's a good time to use a highlighter. I think it's a good useful tool.
Yep. So those are some things before arriving at tree.
Now let's take a look at things after arriving at tree, which is Rule 11B. And the first sentence here tells us, after 3 minutes, first dog's tree may be scored. So we've talked about some situations prior to arriving to the tree where it may not be 3 minutes. The dog's tree could close for several different reasons. If all dogs are declared treed, or you have some hounds on the leash and the other dogs are declared treed. So, but basically after the dog's tree is closed, the tree may be scored. Dog should not be minus tree points if he comes back a short distance to meet handler if dog goes back in and trees satisfactorily. So there's kind of a lot to unpack there, and I know there's a lot of opinions on this, and it will come down to the judge's discretion some. We've talked about this rule a little bit back in the first misinterpretation or misconception podcast that we did, so you can go back and listen to that to hear a lengthy discussion on it. But basically, it has to do with legislating tree style is how it's titled sometimes, if you've seen it in the advisor column or heard us talk about it some. But just telling us, beforehand, a lot of times in a meeting with the judge and the handlers before they ever cut loose, say, is there anything I need to know about your dog? Well, mine may meet us, 5 yards off the tree or something like that. Now, this doesn't tell us that a dog can meet you 50 yards from the tree and go back. It says, a short distance to meet the handler if it goes back in and trees satisfactorily, and it's a judgment call, and I think common sense comes into play here.
Yeah, and I think really what is a short distance? I think you can maybe argue that a little bit and be reasonable about that, but I always kind of used a short distance when the dog could see his handler, probably, when you get to a point where they could see him, And that doesn't mean if they're treed on the edge of the woods and you're across the field 100 yards. No, I'm not talking about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But,
yeah. Next sentence here just says dogs at tree must be leashed. That seems straightforward to a lot of people. There's probably, somebody who's never been in a hunt may not be used to leashing their dog at a tree. If you've been in a few hunts, that's probably the first thing you do in there, whether you're pleasure hunting or anything. You kind of just get used to it. But for some new beginners, that's a good thing to teach them, is go in there and get your dog leashed at the tree, because in a hunt you must. Next one here, 8 minutes of hunting time may be used to shine trees. So 8 minutes now, I think, it's been a while now. It used to be 10 minutes, but it does tell us now it's 8 minutes. I think that's pretty straightforward. As soon as the 8 minutes start, you'll see there's no caveats on squalling or any of that stuff. You can do it at the first of the 8 minutes, and you can use the whole 8 minutes.
Yeah, maybe it says may be used, so sometimes it may be used. You don't have to use all of that,
No.
if you're, sometimes it doesn't, all depends on the tree and, different things, how well you can see it. It might not take that long to score. You go in there, you see a big hole, and Doesn't take long. You can shine all the branches, and it takes less than 8 minutes. Hey, you hear that all the time. Handlers say, "Hey, I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied. I'm satisfied." So.
Yep. And the last sentence of this one here says, individual holding first tree shall be granted first 2 minutes to shine alone if requested. Again, we got a lot of beginners listening to this, hopefully, and if you go in there, don't be surprised if the judge says, hey, you want whoever's dog had first tree on this tree you're shining, don't be surprised if the judge says, hey, you want the first 2 minutes? And if somebody says yes, it doesn't mean that they they don't want other people looking at the tree. Essentially, it could be a time of year where there's a lot of foliage on the trees, and they just want to be able to look at it with a low light without, everybody putting their light in it. And some people are really, really darn good at finding coons, and they have their own technique to do it. And in 2 minutes, a lot of times people can find a coon pretty quick.
You bring up a good point. Some people are really good at finding them. They have their own technique. And I used to feel like I used to have a decent technique, and one of them isn't going to be to throw a bright light up there right away, so yeah, there might be a reason why I want the first 2 minutes to kind of,
Don't take it personal.
Yep, don't take it personal. Yep, that's right. But yeah, you have to give them. It shall be granted first 2 minutes to shine alone if they want to, and if they request it. Yep. Yeah, I think you covered that B pretty well right there. That's after arriving at a tree. So moving on to C talks about if we have split trees now, and then there's also quite a bit on here. And as you always say, to unpack here. So starting with C, where dogs split up, judge will go with handler to the dog that trees first. So we talk about that sometimes up here a lot, is when you score dogs out of order, you are going to walk yourself right into a mess you wish you hadn't. Happens most times. But yeah, where dogs split up on separate trees or whatever, the first dog to declared treed, and you know what? It doesn't matter the distance. I think that's sometimes where things go bad, and they will. And a good example of that is, let's say you have A declared treed straight ahead of you, 500 yards straight ahead of you. B is called treed second, and it is in the same line, and it's only 300 yards ahead of you. You're basically going to walk by it. By the time you get to it, its points or its time is up. No. Go to the first dog, A. You got to go to A first. One of the reasons for that is because that handler also has the first opportunity to recast his dog again, get back to competing. That's the main reason for it.
That's right.
And it is. So there's reason, and we've even see sometimes, well, you think, well, the C is, it doesn't matter because it's not going to hurt A because B can't beat A or what have you. Well, guess what? It affects everything else maybe for other dogs in the cast.
That's right.
Oftentimes they don't think far enough. It might not directly affect this dog, but it might affect somebody else.
Yeah.
The thing is, B needs to be or A always needs to be scored. I say the first tree always needs to be scored first, and that's the one the judge will go to the handler with. If I like this next sentence here, if a split tree is obvious, and in then parentheses it says judge's decision, and uses the word obvious, and key in on obvious. If a split tree is obvious, judge's decision, comma, split tree will be assigned. I always felt like that rule right there made it easy for me as a judge. It's my decision. If it is obvious to me, it doesn't have to be obvious to you or you or you. If it's obvious to me, then only do I put them down as separate trees.
That's right.
And that even allows me to err on the side of they might be, but I am not sure. It is just not obvious to me.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might even think, I think they are, but it's just not obvious.
Yeah.
This rule right here, because the thing is, once it becomes obvious, then I can change that.
That's right.
But until it's obvious to me, whether it's by hearing or seeing, and sometimes it's not until you actually get it. How many times have you went into a tree, they all sounded together. You get in there, one dog's on this tree and one's on a split tree right behind it. It would have never been obvious until you saw it.
Happens all the time.
It happens all the time. So until then, I am not going to put them on the scorecard until it becomes obvious to me. Anything more to add?
No.
All right, next sentence. Separate time must be kept on each tree unless all dogs are declared treed. So we're talking about split trees again. So A is treed by itself. It has 3 minutes. It's got to hold that tree for 3 minutes before we can go into B. If B is on a split tree, it was obvious to me, and I called him split. Then I'm going to keep a separate time, a separate 3-minute clock on that. So that's kind of goes without saying, probably. Judge shall give. Let me back up here. One thing that I don't think we're going to see here is that with the if a split tree is obvious, judge's decision. Back up to that a little bit. Sometimes you hear a handler wanting to make that call on his dog.
Right.
No, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
The judge, not in UKC, the judge is going to. Doesn't matter if you want me to put him down as split or not. It's going to be my decision, and it has to be obvious to me.
Yeah. And when it becomes obvious, you're going to get it
Exactly.
corrected anyway.
Exactly. So I don't really get why it's that
Yeah.
important. Okay. If it's a 3-minute thing, if the tree is closed, you have this thing where if you can't tree on a closed tree, but if you do, then it's going to be put down as split. But that's you have the handler has that, I guess, if it's a situation that where that comes into play, I guess. Next one, separate time kept on each tree. We've already talked about that. Next sentence, judge shall give handler permission to handle dogs on split tree unless cast is in process of shining a tree. So what that means, if you have, obviously, is just what it says. If we're here going to dog A, your Trevor, your dog is dog B, and it is split treed over here, your time is up. I can give you permission to go handle your dog, but then you need to also come back to help us score A.
Because of the majority thing we talked about on scoring trees.
The majority needs to be there to help shine trees, yep, and are needed to plus a coon. But then it says this at the end of it, of that sentence, that's very key here. May give handler permission to handle dog, shall give handler permission to handle dog on split tree unless cast is in process of shining a tree. So if we're already shining a tree, we've handled a dog, we started our time, now we're considered shining. If that's happened, I cannot allow you to send you to go handle your dog now. And one other thing I'll add, it does not give you any exceptions. So the dog can be 10 feet over here, or 10 yards over here, and when it seems like, hey, just let me go handle that dog, it's just right here. The rules don't give you that. So if you do, you're just opening yourself up to be done.
Yeah, we talk about exceptions all the time, and if you make an exception, where do you draw the line?
Yeah,
you may think it's silly to say you can't handle during shine time if your dog's 30 feet away, but this is this person's shine time, and you have to draw the line somewhere. So why not just say you can't do it during shine time? I don't think it would make sense to put in here a handler can't do it on a split tree in the process of shine time if it's over 57 yards away, because nobody's carrying you're not gonna be able to do that. So it makes sense just not to handle the dog during shine time at all.
Yep. So here again, we're talking about everything about split trees here. Next sentence says this: after the split dog is handled, handler shall return to cast. I think I already noted that a little bit ago. Next sentence: if all dogs are declared treed and handled, and cast needs to move to new location after scoring all trees, trees may be scored in most convenient order. Refer to Rule 7E and 11D if applicable. So we actually talked about that under I think it was under
timeouts.
Yeah, timeouts, under timeouts. You'll see that. So you can see that as well. So in that case, if you are going to move, you have all dogs declared treed and handled, and you're going to move and handled. Remember, they're all handled. In that case is the only time that you can score the dogs in the most convenient order, because at that point it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
Now you're going to call time back in again when you score each dog's tree in whatever order that might be, but when they're handled and already handled, and you're going to move to a new location, it's the only time you do that.
Yeah, and you may want to make note of that, because you get that question sometimes. Can you ever score them out of order? There's one situation notated in here, and only one with the way the leash lock is these days, and it requires 3 criteria. So look at them right here. All dogs must be declared treed. All dogs must be handled, and the cast needs to move to to a new location. If all not all dogs are declared treat and the cast needs to move to a new location, if you score them out of the most convenient, if you score them out of order in that situation, dogs could leave a tree and then you're in a pickle.
Mm-hmm.
They have to be treed and handled, and the cast needs to move to a new location. 3 criteria there. If you meet all of those, which is it's pretty rare, so you don't see a lot of scoring out of order. But if all 3 of those things do happen, then that's the only instance you'll see in the rule book where you can score dogs out of order.
I bet there's probably never been a more clarified response to that than you just gave right there. You know, so
Yeah.
there you go.
Snip that out.
You snip it out, cut it out, put it in on your brain. So, and then you just go back and read the rule. It's under, it's under a C there. So be 13 or not 13. What is it? What are we on? 11.
11.
11C. Yep, talking about split trees. And then it ends with otherwise trees must be scored in the order dogs were declared treed. So there you go. There's everything about split trees. I'm sure there's probably some other things that could come up, this or that, but that pretty much should cover most anything that you have to do with split trees.
Yeah, I had to get a little drink of water here before 11D. Gonna have to do some reading here in 11D, talking about recasting. But hey, a lot of this stuff is just going to be rehashing it for you guys, and yeah, hopefully you guys are getting something out of this. I think we're kind of enjoying going through this rule by rule, and
yeah,
I think we're we're able to give some clarifications and some scenarios where we can, and not trying to overdo it or anything. But hopefully you guys are getting something out of it.
Yeah, and I think this one is a new one that we actually added a recasting that is new to this section of the rule book that was done, I think, just in the last rules update, like a couple of years ago. But so we're talking about scoring situations or things before arriving at the tree. After arriving at the tree, number 2, we've got split trees in there, and now this 4th thing, having everything to do with recasting your dogs after you scored them. So this is a good little section too. D.
Yeah. And the first sentence here of 11D under recasting says, after being scored, dog or dogs may be released immediately or led a reasonable distance (parentheses judge's decision) from scored tree before recasting. Yeah, that's pretty straightforward. It used to be a little caveat in this first sentence that told you that you had to hear a declared struck or treed dog open before being able to release your dog, and that was actually removed in the latest rule change in 2023. Now you don't need that. The only thing that has to be done after you score your dog is to lead it a reasonable distance, and that's going to be determined by your judge, probably taking your guide into consideration where the other dogs in the cast are. And you can recast without even hearing a declared struck or treat dog.
Yeah, if I can just add a little bit to it, it says may be released immediately or led a reasonable distance. So I know we have some folks that think we should have a time period to walk away from it, and I get why sometimes. We've just never had that. So what is a reasonable distance? And I don't know. I will just say this. I always thought it worked quite well if I walked, I don't know, give a distance. It really depended on the terrain we're in or where we're in. So whatever I felt was a reasonable distance is what I walked, and I'd stop and I'd say, is this good? And if they'd say yes, and oftentimes it was, and every now and then somebody'd say, hey, I'd like to walk a little further. So I just walked maybe twice that distance, and that was it. And okay, right here's where we're going to turn loose. And off. I don't know that I ever had any argument with that.
Yeah.
If you're not careful, sometimes somebody that wants to walk further than that probably has other agendas here. They're trying to suck up time or doing something to benefit them. So you're the judge. You take control of that.
Absolutely. Second sentence here is kind of a continuation of that first sentence. It says, however, if another dog in cast is declared treed, handler has the option to recast or keep scored dog on leash. So there's not necessarily any leash lock in UKC anymore unless the handler wants to be on the leash. And the situation where you can keep your dog on the leash is if there is another dog in the cast that is declared treed when you're pulling off there. If there's no other dogs in the cast declared treed and they're maybe just declared struck or maybe not even heard from them yet, you have to cut loose. But if at least one dog is declared treed, or if all dogs are declared treed, you have the option to recast or to keep your dog on the leash until the next opportunity arises.
Otherwise, you're just going to flip back loose again.
Yep.
And that rule is a little slightly different than some other registries recasting rules or leash lock rules, or where you can here it's the option. And one dog declared treat, that gives the handler the option. And let's talk. Go ahead, because what I was going to say comes up next, I think.
Yeah, and like you said, what may be different for some of them is they're used to being able to recast or use their option if there's one dog declared treat. But with all dogs declared treat, sometimes in other registries you're leash locked in that situation. But in ours, you have the option to
Still have
also
the option.
recast
Yeah.
even if all dogs are declared
Yep.
treat, which is
Mhm.
different from how it used to
Mhm.
be
Yeah.
several years
Yeah.
ago. Next sentence here again is a continuation of that same point. It says handlers opting to keep dog on leash may not recast dog until next opportunity arises. In parentheses, it says next tree is scored or dog leaves tree. So if I'm electing to keep my dog on the leash heading to a declared tree dog, I can't just change my mind. Maybe there's a third dog out there that's just barely trailing me in the cast and it falls tree and I say, "Oh boy, maybe I should cut loose now." No, you've already made your decision. You're going to keep your dog on the leash heading to the tree dog, and you won't be able to release your dog until that tree is scored. Or if something were to happen and that dog that you're heading to were to leave the tree, at that point you'd also be given the ability to release your dog.
Yep, that here again, that falls on the judge to communicate with that handler what they're going to do, if they want their option to hang on, or if they're going to cut loose, so everybody's on the same page.
Yep.
And here, let's just so we're clear on this, you and I might have just scored your dog and my dog. You may opt to cut loose. Doesn't mean I can't hang on to my dog. We don't have to agree on doing the same thing.
The next sentence here in 11D tells us if all remaining dogs in cast are declared treed and cast decides they need to move to a new location after all dogs are scored, all scored dogs shall remain on leash and timeout shall be called while walking to split trees. This is one that we've talked about both in 7E and right above this in 11C a little bit. Here's the 11D version of it, just telling us that when it comes to recasting, if we decide that we are going to move locations, that's the situation where you would elect to keep your dog on the leash, and at that point you're leash locked, but time would be called out. You'd only call time in to score trees for other dogs that were declared trees.
That's right.
Next sentence here says hunt time shall be called back in during shine time only. So there we go. Just a continuation of the sentence before that. And next it says otherwise scored dog may be recast even if all remaining dogs are declared treed. So we've also touched on that a little bit already.
You just did a little bit ago. That's one of the differences, that even with all of them, unless you're going to move, you have the option to cut loose.
Yep. Next here says once a position has been scored, it becomes available again. Sometimes this could be a discussion point for some people because, well, let's go on to the next one here. Let me reread that and read the next sentence as well. I think that's going to inspire a little bit more discussion, maybe. Once a position has been scored, it becomes available again. A dog declared struck after the recast receives the next available strike position. However, a dog cannot be struck in over a position that is being held except when a dog holds its strike position for 1 hour. So first, we should probably unload that.
Yeah.
So after you're out getting off of a scoring situation, and after you recast your dog, the strike position that you were holding is now available. But it also tells us we can't strike in over another dog. So let's say two different scenarios. First off, we're in a 4-dog cast, and my dog jams a coon right out of the truck for 100 and 125, and we haven't heard from anything else yet. So we pull my dog off the tree, I cut it loose, maybe he's in a pocket of coons, and he gets struck again. My 100's already been scored, nothing else is open, 100's still available, so I can strike in for 100.
Is available again.
Yep, that's right. So I'm in good shape in that cast.
Yeah, yeah.
Next situation here, all dogs strike after we release it. They're running tracks, maybe in different directions. My dog gets treed in. We go in and score it, and I recast my dog. I was holding 100 strike. I recast 100's available again, but also 75, 50, and 25 are taken. So while 100 is available, I can't strike in over any dog that's currently holding position. So the most I can go in for is a quarter because I can't strike in over other dogs that are already holding a position.
That's right.
It does tell us that there's a little caveat at the end of that last sentence that said, except when a dog holds his strike position for 1 hour. And the next sentence continues, in that case, all strike positions will be open to other dogs. So this is talking about a rule that's been around for a while. There's been some provisions to it over years, but that's been a while in the past. This is just telling us if a dog were to hold its strike position for an hour, so maybe a dog strikes early on and ends up working its way out of hearing or down in a ravine where we can't hear it, or maybe it's just flat running a track that it just can't put an end to. It's out in a cornfield or a bean field running a track for over an hour. That strike position become available again. Now remember, you can't strike over dogs that are currently holding positions, but if that dog were to strike in and you score trees and the hour has elapsed, you can strike that dog's position becomes available. Doesn't mean you minus that dog's position. You just could have two dogs holding the same position at the same time.
Yeah, and we talk about that note keeping box on the scorecards, and that's why sometimes this is one that is very easy to get away from the judge if they don't think about it to begin with, and maybe make their own little notes, kind of note some times, what time they cut the dog, what time a dog opened up first, and most of the time it's not going to come into play, but when they need it, when it has, you also need to have something, a good reference to go back to. How long has this dog been holding this, to open it up for other dogs. So.
Yeah, and then the next sentence here tells us the strike position previously held by dogs on leash is not available until dog is recast. So that's telling me that after I score my tree and I go to and before I cut loose, if somebody were to strike in, they can't take my position yet because I haven't recast my dog yet.
That's right, and I think that's a little bit different than some other registries, but that's always been the case in UKC, and something to think about here. It comes up sometimes,
and something that I've been wrong about before, and you've corrected me on, and is if I pull my dog off of there and there's another dog declared treed and I take my option to keep my dog on the leash, I haven't recast my dog, so my strike points haven't become available yet until after I do recast my dog per the rule book.
That's right.
And the very last sentence here, we made it through here. It says multiple dogs may occupy fourth strike position. So if everything, in the situation I was talking about where I'm toting 100 strike and we score my tree and I'm recasting and 75, 50, and 25 are taken, then I can strike in for a quarter, and it could be multiple dogs holding a quarter. And I think most days now, with most dogs being split treed, a majority of the time we see a lot of dogs toting 25 strikes around quite a bit.
Yep. So there you go. So yeah, I don't think I really have anything more to add after that, but I love that recasting section, just gives more information on recasting after you've done the scoring. And this whole section of section 11 about scoring dogs is a good one for handlers, whether you're new to it or even experienced, very well experienced. Good to go back and read everything word for word.
Alan, I know we both have new Dogtra Pathfinder 2s. How are you liking yours so far?
I'm liking it. I've even had the opportunity now to use mine where I didn't have service, where I download the map of that area, and it works flawlessly. Love it.
I agree. I really like my Dogtra Pathfinder 2 as well. I've used it quite a bit the past few months. I really like the crystal clear maps. I like that it doesn't lose service very much, and I don't have many bad things to say about it at all. Dogtra Pathfinder 2, the official GPS collar partner of UKC. Thank you for listening to the UKC Hunting Ops Podcast. Be sure to give us a follow so you don't miss any of our new episodes or content.